What if the greatest masterpiece you ever created was the hardest to see? Astrid had lived a life dictated by the ticking of clocks. 60 years in the same office, the same route home, the same predictable meals. Her world was a symphony of routine, a metronome marking time with unwavering precision. But beneath the surface of her ordered existence lay a silent longing, a melody unsung. Now, retired and living in a small coastal town in Maine, Astrid found herself face to face with the vast expanse of her days. The ocean, once a distant hum in the background of her life, now roared with a constant presence, a powerful reminder of the time that both stretched endlessly before her and relentlessly slipped away. She rattled around her late husband George's woodworking shop, crammed tight with half-finished projects and the ghosts of his laughter. One blustery afternoon, while rummaging through a dusty box, Astrid stumbled upon a collection of old photographs. Images of their younger selves, sun-kissed and carefree, tumbled out, each one a portal to a moment she had almost forgotten. There was George, beaming at the camera, a freshly carved wooden bird perched on his palm. There she was, her hair long and unbound, dancing in a summer rain. A pang of regret, sharp and unexpected, pierced through her. Regret for the chances not taken, the words unspoken, the adventures unlived. Carefully constructed order of her life seemed now like a gilded cage, beautifully crafted, but ultimately confining. The next morning, spurred by a need she couldn't quite articulate, Astrid ventured into town. She found herself drawn to a small, unassuming art supply store, its windows filled with vibrant colors and intriguing shapes. Hesitantly, she stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of turpentine and possibility. A young woman with paint-stained fingers greeted her with a warm smile. "Can I help you find something?" she asked. Astrid hesitated. I don't know," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "I haven't painted since I was a girl." The young woman, whose name was Claire, simply smiled. "Well, it's never too late to start again." And so Astrid began. Tentatively at first, she picked up a brush, dipped it in paint, and tentatively touched it to canvas. The colors felt foreign and bold, the movements clumsy and uncertain. But as she continued, something began to shift within her. The rigid structure of her mind began to loosen, the silent melody within her began to find its voice. She started with simple landscapes, trying to capture the rugged beauty of the Maine coastline. Then, as her confidence grew, she began to experiment with abstract forms, bold strokes of color that mirrored the emotions swirling within her. One day, while working on a particularly challenging piece, Astrid felt a familiar wave of frustration wash over her. The painting, a swirling vortex of blues and grays, seemed to resist her every attempt to control it. She threw down her brush in exasperation. Claire, who had been observing her from a distance, approached her. Gently. "What's wrong, Astrid?" "I can't do it," Astrid said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's just a mess. I don't even know what I'm trying to say." Claire picked up the discarded brush and held it out to Astrid. "Sometimes," she said, "the most beautiful things are born out of chaos. Don't try to control it. Just let it flow." Astrid took the brush back in her hand and closed her eyes. She took a deep breath and began to paint again, this time without thinking, without judging, without trying to force the canvas to conform to her will. She let the colors guide her, let the emotions pour out of her and onto the canvas. When she finally opened her eyes, she was astonished by what she saw. The painting was no longer a mess. It was a raw, powerful expression of everything she had been feeling, a swirling landscape of joy, sorrow, regret. It was the story of her life, rendered in vibrant color and bold strokes. As the months passed, Astrid continued to paint. She painted the memories of her childhood, the joy of her marriage, the pain of her loss. She painted the beauty of the natural world and the complex landscape of her inner world. She painted her regrets and she painted her hopes. Her paintings were not always pretty. They were often messy, chaotic, and imperfect. But they were always honest. They were always true. Word of Astrid's art began to spread throughout the town. People were drawn to the raw emotion and vulnerability of her work. They saw in her paintings a reflection of their own lives, their own struggles, their own hopes. One day, a local gallery owner approached Astrid with an offer to exhibit her work. Astrid was hesitant. She had never considered herself an artist. She had always believed that art was something for other people, for those who were naturally talented and creative. But Claire encouraged her to take the leap. "Don't be afraid, Astrid," she said. "Your art has something important to say. The world needs to see it." And so Astrid agreed. The opening night of her exhibition was a resounding success. People from all walks of life came to see her paintings. They were moved by the raw emotion and the unflinching honesty of her work. They saw in her paintings a testament to the power of the human spirit, the capacity for resilience, the enduring beauty of a life lived fully, even with its imperfections. As Astrid stood in the crowded gallery, surrounded by her paintings and the people who had come to see them, she felt a sense of peace wash over her that she had not felt in years. She had spent so much of her life trying to control things, trying to create a perfect order, trying to avoid pain and discomfort. But in the end, it was in embracing the chaos, in allowing herself to be vulnerable, in expressing her true self, that she had found her greatest joy. The greatest masterpiece she had ever created wasn't a flawlessly executed painting or a perfectly ordered life. It was a messy, imperfect, and utterly authentic expression of her own heart. Years later, sitting on a porch swing overlooking the ocean, Astrid remembered that night. The salt air filled her lungs and seagulls cried out overhead. Her hands, gnarled and spotted with age, held a half-finished sketch pad. She added a few more strokes to her latest piece, a watercolor of the same coastline that had inspired so much of her work. This one was different, though. It wasn't just the sea and the rocks. This one had figures barely visible, a younger couple dancing in the sand, the waves crashing softly at their feet. Astrid laid down the brush and smiled. She thought of her life then, the life before the paintings, the life before she dared to become what she was meant to be. A life lived according to someone else's expectations, another's dreams. A life half-lived. "It's never too late," she whispered to the wind. The ocean seemed to whisper back in agreement. Yes, she had regrets. She regretted the years she had spent hiding her true self, the opportunities she had missed, the words she had left unsaid. The burden of conformity had weighed her down, anchoring her to a life that wasn't entirely her own. But she had learned that regret, like any other emotion, could be a powerful catalyst for change. It could be a reminder to live more fully, to embrace the present moment, to create a future that was truly her own. Regret could be a teacher, whispering its lessons, reminding you to never give up on yourself. What if the masterpiece wasn't about the art itself, but about the courage to begin? The willingness to unveil your most authentic self, regardless of age or circumstance. The acceptance that a life, like a painting, is most beautiful when it embraces its imperfections. Astrid closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face and the cool breeze in her hair. She still had time, and she was determined to make the most of it. The clock was still ticking, but now she was the one setting the rhythm. The melody was finally hers. The world was full of colors, still unseen, just waiting for her. All she needed was the courage to paint the canvas of her life, and in the end, perhaps that's all any of us need.